and or Africans go from asking such a big question, right? How do we contribute to sustainably alleviating the pressure on farming, to actually acting and creating a company or two companies in your case? How did you make that?
I think it's a interesting question, I think, and it's probably different for each one of us. It's probably quite a personal question.
Yeah.
But I think for each one of us, it's just, there comes a turning point in your life where you're like, yes, I either care about animals, or yes, I'm a vegan, or I'm a vegetarian, or I care about the environment. And then you start thinking, cool, I've stopped eating the dairy-based foods or the meats or something like that, and I've started eating more plants. Mm-hmm. But then you also get to a point like, what else can I do? What more can I contribute to the society that we live in, to the country that we live in, and what bigger impact can you make outside of yourself to take what you believe in further? And I think that is essentially just where we decided, you know what? Let's start a venture. Let's start something where we can have an impact, not just on ourselves and not just where we live, but on a bigger scale. And I think it's just kind of stemmed out from there.
Mm-hmm. And did your backgrounds, Leah, in your case, food science, did that have anything to do with then the direction? I mean, I'm sure there's a lot that you could have chosen to do, but then you decided to do something about actually, precision fermentation and insect-derived dairy. That probably played a role.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, coming from a pretty academic background, I was very interested in the whole innovation side and sort of on the cusp of new proteins.
Yeah.
And then Jean, being more commercial, was the one who convinced me to turn it into a company. Like, how do we make this have a big impact?
Yeah.
And then from there, we actually had the idea of doing Novo Dairy a little bit earlier, sort of the technology. Mm-hmm. But there are certain aspects of the science that aren't in my field. So when Joni and Richard, sort of came into the space, and they also fulfill a lot of those aspects, I think it sort of was a bit of a no-brainer to dive headfirst.
Yeah. I just wanted to clarify a term that we've used, precision fermentation. Can you help us? What is precision fermentation?
Yeah, so precision fermentation is really just a very fancy way of explaining that we're using modified yeast to produce dairy protein. So typically yeast would produce things like alcohol or carbon dioxide and bacon. Yeah. We just have really special yeast and we modify it, and we basically program it to produce nature identical proteins.
Okay,
so it's
perfect.
Fermentation that's very precise.
The next question that I have for you is, I think you've covered it, but if you had to summarize the purpose of Novo Dairy as relates to Africa and even globally, what would you say that is?
So this is sort of two parts. I think from a product perspective, Africa is an emerging market and there's going to be an increase in demand for protein. Mm-hmm. And it's really about creating a sustainable protein source where once we get to scale, we truly believe it can be cost competitive. Mm-hmm. And it's about creating those really nutritious proteins for the African market. And I think it's also important. So the second part of the question is, like, for us, we really want that technology to come from Africa.
Yes.
We want Africa to be self-sufficient and we can. I mean, we have, I think Africa is probably the most innovative continent there is. And it's just like, I want the technology and the production to come in-house, and I want us to have an impact on the global food system like we have the capacity to do.
Yeah. And when we talk about capacity, I must say our youth, like you guys, myself, I think that is one of the biggest capital that we have as a continent. We have the youth that is now majority of the population, and that youth is growing and it's being empowered by education. I mean, there are other things that are also strengthening our capacity as an innovative powerhouse continent, but I think our youth are definitely able to make the difference that needs to shift Africa in the right direction. So I commend you guys for this, for taking it on. And I know that working in Africa, starting a company in Africa, I mean, people have tried it. people haven't made it. What are some of the challenges that you guys have encountered that are unique to working in an environment like Africa? And preferably ones that you've come around, just to give people perspective that it's not an impossible situation. So something that you've encountered, and how did you get around it?
Yeah, I think starting a company as a whole is definitely a difficult thing to do, no matter where you are in the world.
Yeah.
Whether you're in America or in Africa or in Europe, it's definitely a challenge that I think really stretches you as a human. But
Yeah.
I think in Africa, I mean, there are, of course, many challenges that we have here. One thing that we experienced a few years ago, but I think that is luckily changing very rapidly now, is access to capital. You can see very clearly that people are starting to pay attention to Africa. There is a lot more VC money and institutional money that's flowing into Africa. Something that even in 2018, when we were busy with Gourmet Grub, there was none of that. So I think that is something that, although still a very small amount of money compared to the rest of the world, but nonetheless, in terms of the percentage growth is immense, and I think that is going to continue growing. It's something that is going to continue to improve, and more people are going to show interest, and that is going to be a real game changer for Africa. Other than that, like you said, education is something that is now becoming more and more important, which is amazing. I think one challenge, and this is something that we once again experienced a few years ago, is, finding the right people for your company, people that are educated in the realm or the field that you require them to be in. That is something that is also, I think, somewhat of a challenge, because I think if you look at somewhere like America, there's such a broad spectrum of people that have studied so many things, and I think here it's still something that needs to grow and something that needs to improve significantly.
Yeah.
But once again, I think it is something that is happening. So although it is a problem that we've encountered, it is slowly but surely changing, which is very promising, and I think very positive for the future of Africa.
You mentioned a few things, which is capital, so access to capital. I'm sure you've had investors join your venture. I'm curious, how does one go from idea to getting investors interested? Can you quickly talk us through that process for anyone who's interested? Because you make a good point. In 2018, like you said, there wasn't access, there wasn't interest or inflow of that capital. And now it seems to be a great window of opportunity for anyone with an innovative idea to take it from that ideation process to actually starting a venture, a company, or if you may. So how does one quickly, a master class of a few seconds, how did you guys do it?